Hello and welcome back to bicyclelegs Talks Music and another episode of Studio Albums Ranked. Today I'm going to be looking at the solo discography of John Lennon, obviously best known as one of the Beatles. I've done Paul McCartney top 10 in the past, and I've done a George Harrison studio albums ranked as well. I'll leave links to those both in the description, so please do check those out if you haven't already. I'm going to be looking at 8 John Lennon albums, either with or without Yoko, but I'm only going to be looking at the song-based ones, so I'm not going to be looking at the experimental sort of noise albums that he did in the late 60s with Yoko. I'm going to be looking at the ones that are basically song-based. So there's 8 albums in all. Going to be ranking them from my least favorite to my most favorite, but I do like all of these albums. There really aren't any that I don't like. So let's get into it and start with my number 8, which is his album from 1975, and that is Rock and Roll. Now, this album, it's an album of cover versions of old 50 songs. That would become a lot more popular sort of a little further down the track. Certainly, it was starting to be a thing with Pin-Ups by David Bowie and some of those early Brian Ferry albums, but it would become more and more popular as time would go on. I like this album quite a bit, but I really want to hear John Lennon doing his own songs. Having said that, I do love the version he does of Stand By Me. Bebopalula is great. There's a couple of, great little medleys on here. Yeah, yeah, Boney Maroney. It's just wonderful 50s rock and roll. It's done in that very 70s style, though. If you're thinking sort of the Walls and Bridges and Mind Games sort of sound for a lot of this, that's kind of what you're going to get on this album. And that makes sense too, because the early sessions were produced with Phil Spector, the later sessions were produced by John on his own. It was a real schmozzle getting this album together. There was all sorts of nonsense with Phil Spector and holding on to tapes and all this sort of thing. So yeah, it was a difficult birth, this album, but I think it came out pretty good in the end. But as I say, it's not my favorite John Lennon album by any stretch. My number 7 is an album that he did with Yoko in 1972. It's a double album, and that is Sometime in New York City. Now, basically, this album, I mean, it is a double album, but it's basically an album plus a bonus disc because the bonus disc is live stuff and it's sort of like collaboration with Frank Zappa and, they're jamming on stage and all that sort of thing. And, it's not the main meat of this album. This album's very much a protest album. You've got John contributing some of the songs, you've got Yoko contributing some of the songs. I am not one of these people who, hates on Yoko. I find some of her stuff really, really good, as we will see as we get along in this catalog. But this album, maybe not so much. I feel like this is not the best of either John or Yoko. Still, you've got some good songs on here, like Luck of the Irish and John Sinclair. Born in a Prison is a really good Yoko song. I mean, the single off this album is the one there in the middle. I'm not even going to read that title because it's, offensive, that title. But I understand where Yoko was coming from trying to get that title. That one's a collaboration song, but it's still no. You just can't use that word. So, yeah, some of this album works, some of it not so much. I'm not sure Elephant's Memory were a great backup band for him. They would do that live album that would be released posthumously as well. But yeah, I think this album has its moments, but it's not John's strongest work or Yoko's for that matter. At number 6, I'm going to have the posthumous John and Yoko album from 1984, and that is Milk and Honey. I think this is a really good album. I think everything going on from here is really, really good. Probably the only thing about this album is that, the John songs, because of the circumstances, these were being recorded when John was murdered. His songs are a little unfinished. I mean, they did come back and add instruments and all that sort of thing, but some of the vocals sound a bit like scratch vocals, and that he would have come back and recorded a proper vocal for and all that sort of thing. Having said that, the single off this album was Nobody Told Me, and I adore that song. I remember when that came out, I would have been about 13 at the time, and I really, really love that song, and I still do. I think it's a great song. Um, and Yoko, has some great songs on here too. So, but you got things like I'm Stepping Out, Sleepless Night, Don't Be Scared, Oh Sanity, Grow Old with Me. I mean, such a beautiful song. Again, a really unfinished song, but just absolutely heartbreaking because, they never got to grow old together. Um, I like this album quite a lot. I think that the albums that are coming up are a little bit better, but I think this album is really, really good considering the circumstances in which it was made too. I mean, yeah. At number five, I'm going to have John's album from 1973, and that is Mind Games. This has recently had a super deluxe edition version come out with all sorts of bonus tracks and all that sort of thing. I don't own that, but I've heard it's very, very good for what it is. This is John and Yoko were having this is at the beginning of sort of the breakup that would lead to John Lennon's Lost Weekend. And you can tell by that cover, she's sort of hovering over him in his mind and all that sort of thing. But the title track is absolutely wonderful. Tight As is really cool. Um, Aisuma-san, I'm sorry. Um, I know, You Are Here. Meat City. Love that song. Really, really cool. Um, Bring On DeLucy is really good too. Yeah, it's a really good album. Definitely a more mainstream album, but I think that John pulls it off really well. And you could say a lot about that with my number four album as well, which is his album from 1974, which is Walls and Bridges, with that wonderful die cut sleeve with the bits that, oh, you know, they fold out and all that sort of thing. So there's John poking his tongue out. But obviously, this had his big number one in the US hit, Whatever Gets You Through the Night. But it's also got the wonderful Going Down on Love, Bless You, What You Got. I love that song. It's a really, really good song. Number Nine Dream was the other sort of hit single off this album, which I think is really beautiful and dreamy. Um, Steel and Glass. Great, great song. Real underrated deep cut from John Lennon. Nobody Loves You When You're Down and Out is really sort of heartbreaking. And then you got a beautiful sort of little cover version of Ya Ya at the end with a very young Julian Lennon sort of banging along on drums. It's very cute. So yeah, I really like this is a great, great album. I really enjoy it a lot. Again, very commercial and obviously it works because he had the big hit with Whatever Gets You Through the Night, which obviously features Elton John on it as well. I think this is a terrific album. But these top three albums are just absolutely stellar as far as I'm concerned. My order might surprise some people, I don't know, but my number three is going to be his album from 1971, and that is Imagine. Terrific album, absolutely great album. But there's just some songs, there's just a couple of albums I like a little bit better, and it's small margins at this point. And this has obviously got Imagine on it, and it's also got, the beautiful Jealous Guy. It's got I Don't Want to Be a Soldier Mama, I Don't Want to Die. It's got It's So Hard on it. It's got The Withering How Do You Sleep, which, just absolutely massive diss track, maybe one of the first full-on diss tracks, aimed at Paul McCartney and that sort of thing. It's got the wonderful Oh Yoko at the end, which I think is absolutely a hoot. Just a fabulous album. I love this album a lot. My number two is going to be his album from 1980 with Yoko Ono, and that is Double Fantasy. What an incredible album. He'd been away for 5 years. He makes this album. It's such a great comeback. And yeah, unfortunately, he wouldn't be around to see the full-on success of this album. I mean, it's got the wonderful Just Like Starting Over. It's got, and Yoko's songs are great on here too. Kiss, 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 wonderful song. Beautiful Boys is a wonderful song, as is John's Beautiful Boy. You know, you've got the wonderful I'm Losing You and I'm Moving On, which is kind of a conversational pair of songs, one from John, one from Yoko. Absolutely brilliant. Um, it's got got the great Hard Times Are Over. It's got John's Fabulous Woman. Um, just a terrific album, beginning to end. I would have loved to have seen where John and Yoko would have gone from here. I mean, we get a little bit of a taste of it on Milk and Honey, in an unfinished form, as it were. But I really would have loved to have seen where John would go with his solo career throughout the 80s and beyond. But unfortunately, it was never meant to be. And my number one was always going to be my number one. It's his 1970 album, John Lennon Plastic Ono Band. I mean, for a long time, this was my favorite Beatles solo album. It's since been eclipsed by All Things Must Pass, maybe even by Ram as well. But this album is just still so intense. You know, Mother, my goodness, what a way to start an album. And then it closes with God, and then the little coda of My Mummy's Dead. The stuff you've got in between, Working Class Hero, Well, 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 Hold On, Isolation. I mean, just so many really, really good tracks. Love, you know, just it's not all primal scream and that, a song like Love is just so gentle and fragile and gorgeous. And most of this album is just a trio of John Lennon, Klaus Voormann on bass, and Ringo Starr on drums. And yeah, it's a terrific album. It's one of my all-time favorite albums. So that is my John Lennon studio albums rank, going back from number one through to number 8. At number 1, got John Lennon Plastic Ono Band. At number 2, we've got Double Fantasy. At number 3, Imagine. At number 4, Walls and Bridges. At number 5, Mind Games. At number 6, Milk and Honey. At number 7, Sometime in New York City. And at number 8, Rock and Roll. So that's my John Lennon studio albums ranked. Please do let me know in the comments how you would rank these albums. What are your favorites? What are your least favorites? Where do you agree with me? Where do you disagree with me? I love reading the comments. So please leave me a comment and let me know what you think. Please do like, share, and subscribe. It really does help the channel out. If you're new to the channel, please go and have a look at some of my other videos. I have everything playlisted, so if you want to look at some of my other studio albums ranked shows, I have a playlist for those. If you want to see some of my favorite albums of all time shows, I have a playlist for those. And if you want to see my appearances on other people's channels, I also have a playlist for those. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm at bicyclelegs on Instagram, Twitter, and a bunch of other places. I also have a dedicated bicyclelegs Facebook page. Links are all in the doobly-doo. Please do give those all a follow and join in the conversation. I'd really love to have you there. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.